Hello, Sunshine. I'm ALEXI LALAS, and welcome to the State of the Union podcast, where we look at the beautiful game on and off the field through the lens of red, white, and blue-colored glasses. This week, we'll be talking, for lack of a better word, Americanness, the Vow, Chicharito, Brothers, Barca, Alisson, I don't know if I said that right, Mossy, Louis, yelling in the morning, Tebow, rebrands, and so much more. But first, joining me, as always, my colleague, my guiding light, David Mossy, a soccer savant and a Fox Soccer researcher and writer extraordinaire. Mossy, how are you doing on this Monday, May 17th in the year 2021?
I am doing well after a long Sunday of work. It was a lot of fun, but it was a very long day for both of us. Huh?
It was a long day, 2 MLS games, and they weren't back-to-back, and so we had a little break in between, but it was fun. All sorts of MLS action, and look, I'm never going to complain about working. I got a job, thankfully. I know people out there are scratching their heads as to why that is, but as long as they're going to keep having me, I will do it. Mossy, quick, before we get into what's going to be a really interesting show, I think. I've been watching something called The Vow. Have you heard of this? It's called The Vow. Not. It's on HBO. It's 9 parts. It's episodal, all right? And it's about this crazy sex cult up in Albany, New York, of all places. Nexium. That's where it's kind of where it was. You might have heard about it because there were a bunch of actresses and some famous people, but it's just nuts. It is crazy. 9 episodes, and I can't stop watching it. So check that out. That's my recommendation for the week. Anything you want to say recommendation-wise that you're watching or listening to out there?
Well, on the topic of cults in New York, I did watch the Son of Sam documentary that you recommended last week, and I found it fascinating as well. So thank you.
Did you know anything about David Berkowitz and Son of Sam beforehand, or?
I did, but I did not know about John Carr and any of this other alternate theory. So
crazy, right?
Elucidating, yeah.
Craziness. All right, listen, we're going to get right into the show here. You ready to light this candle, Mossy?
Yep.
All right, so we're going to do a little something different here at the start of the State of the Union pod. We have brought on a guest. Now, that's not necessarily something new. We've been trying to do that as we have gone along. But we have brought on an author, okay? Now, listen, I know in this day and age, in 2021, reading is not in vogue, all right? But books are still written. Books are still being read. And so we have brought on Steven Mandis, all right? He's a good Greek boy. Not only that, he's from Michigan, okay? He's pretty much, I think he's exactly my age. I think he's a 1970 birth, and he's a wonderful author. And I'm going to go through his credentials here, and we're going to talk about his brand new book, and I'll tell you why we're going to talk about it here in a second. But anyway, Steven, all right, let's see. He has written, What Happened at Goldman Sachs, which is an insider story of the organizational drift and unintended consequences. He's written about all sorts of soccer too, including the Real Madrid way, how values created the most successful sports team on the planet, and what happened to Serie A, the rise and fall and signs of revival. Excuse me. All of that is to say is this guy is well steeped, not just in the game of soccer, okay, but also in the business of soccer and what soccer is around the planet in all of its many forms. He is also, if you want to add some more stuff, just recently been appointed the senior academic advisor to FIFA, and he continues to be an adjunct associate professor over there of, I think it's finance and economics over there at Columbia University. So a well-accomplished scholar out there who is also writing some really, really interesting stuff about the game that we love. And the reason why we brought him on is he has a new book out. If you are listening to this on Tuesday, May 18th, it is out today. So congratulations to him on his new book. It is called What Happened to the U.S. Men's National Soccer Team? ? The Ugly Truth About the Beautiful Game. And I should mention that he is a co-writer. So his co-writer is Sarah Parsons Wolter. I want to welcome to the State of the Union, Mr. Steven Mandis. How are you, my friend?
I'm well. Thank you for having me.
All right. So the reason why we wanted to talk to you is that this book, one of the things that you talk about in this book, is that there is an American way out there when it comes to soccer, both on and off the field in this culture. And not only do you talk about it, but you kind of lean into it. And something that we do on this show, and certainly I have done over the years, that we often apologize for what we are or what we aren't. And there is an American soccer culture. It is vibrant, it is discerning, it is passionate. And you argue in this book that not only does it exist, but if we hope to move forward and evolve and ultimately be successful, that we need to lean into that, as it were, into that Americanness, for lack of a better word, that we have. Have I framed it correctly?
That's correct.
Okay, why is that? Why do you think that?
Well, the United States, and this is one of the ugly truths, because many experts don't want to admit it or want to overlook it, is that the United States has a style of play, or had a style of play, and that was primarily counterattack, working groups defensively, and that made a lot of sense for us, for where we were in our development, as well as the history of the game and how it's taught. And people then started to get this idea that in order for us to be more legitimate or to be considered more of a soccer power, we had to play more progressive, play from the back, proactive style. And that in many ways has impacted the identity of the team, not just the style of the team. And I know that you are always, when you're talking about the team, you're also sort of giving feedback on that there's something missing in the identity.
So, but where does this, and I've talked about this many, many times, where does this, I guess, this insecurity, and it's not just players, it's kind of throughout the American soccer culture, where does this insecurity or this inferiority complex come from, other than the fact that we are not a traditional soccer country and culture? And why do you think it's dissipating?
Well, what's happened, we shouldn't be surprised by this, because it's not also happening in the United States, it's happening around the world. And I'll give Brazil as an example, because I know David's focused on that as well. So Europe has won the last 4 World Cups. You have France at 1, Germany, Spain, Italy. Also, we could talk about this, all of them are from the top 5 leagues. And there's an advantage because you have dominant teams in those leagues who tend to produce the players that wind up playing on their national team. But this started to gravitate people towards, hey, there's something in Europe that's going on. The top leagues are in Europe. The top players are going to Europe. If you read the book Soccernomics, they'll tell the Americans, if you want to be better, you have to hire European coaches, take on European styles. So all of this influence started to come to us. And the people who doubt this or question this will say, okay, well, in the North American Soccer League, there was never one team that had FC, United, SC, or Sporting in it. Today, 16 teams in the MLS have those European affiliations with their clubs, even though we don't call soccer football here, or we don't call things clubs here. So that gives us an indication that Europe is somehow impacting our legitimacy. There's no European basketball teams that are called the Bulls or the Lakers or the Celtics. If you ever go to a European soccer game, you'll see that the players walk onto the pitch holding hands with little kids, right? And what do they do in the MLS? They do the same exact thing. Okay, in a European basketball game, they don't do what Americans do, shoot T-shirts out of cannons and have these star glitter shows when the players enter. Actually, what they do is they have the football tifos, the big flags that roll out over this. So they took their football traditions and put them into basketball. So what we started to see was actually it was the Americans that started to adapt these European ideas for legitimacy, not the other way around in basketball, which we found fascinating.
Mossy, go ahead.
Yeah, Steven, I loved your book. The only thing I bumped up against a little bit, and I told you this when we spoke, is there are certain things that I just consider basic tenets of good soccer that you treat as a stylistic choice. I would argue that producing more technically gifted players and playing more technically proficient soccer is just the natural evolution of a soccer nation. I'm sure ALEXI would tell you the U.S.'s style of play in the 90s was somewhat out of necessity. I'm sure if they had more Tab Ramoses on the team, they might have taken a bit of a different approach. So you see what Greg Berhalter is trying to do now as him making a stylistic choice rather than just sort of the U.S. naturally evolving and producing more technically gifted players?
Okay, so the discussion was great that we had. One of the things I pointed out to you was take Atletico Madrid as an example. Atletico Madrid has João Felix, it had Antoine Griezmann, it had all these great talents. They're a very talented team. But when they play Eibar and Leganés and all these other clubs, they play the same exact with the identity of grit and what we would say is counterattacking, great defense football. They don't play a different way against Leganés and Eibar than they do against Real Madrid and Barcelona. And when I asked Simeone about this, he said, what happens is if you do, because I said, well, why do you score more goals? Because you'll get more people to watch you on TV and you'll generate more revenues and more social media followers and you'll have better highlights. Like, it's very important for club soccer to have excitement. And he's like, but then we'll lose our identity. You can't go play one way against a group of people and then another way against the group of people. And you see, that's what's happened in the United States, that as the talent has improved, people said, oh, let's play one style against CONCACAF teams that we may have more talent than. But then when we play Belgium in the World Cup, we have to play a defensive way. So it's kind of interesting. If you look at the data, you look at Jurgen Klinsmann, he averaged 2 goals per game during his tenure in competitions. But against top 20 teams, he averaged 0.73 goals per game. Okay, that is less than Bradley and Arena. And what happens is you start to lose your identity by trying to say, hey, with that talent, we can play one way against somebody and another way against others. And that,
Steven, you're a smart guy, okay? Especially when it comes to the business of soccer, which I know that you think about too. So when you say, you know, what is authentic and what isn't authentic, and trying to be authentic and trying to find an identity, there are some smart men and women that are making decisions. I mean, even this last week, we saw, to your point about the SC and the more European type of branding. Why do you think that they believe that is the way to go? And why would you, if you were in a room with them, tell them, no, that's not the way to go? Because, like I said, they're smart. They have people that are telling them, theoretically, I don't know, I'm not in the room, but you think that they are doing things that are going to, from their perspective, they believe is going to help their business. So why do we continue to do that?
Yeah, so there's club football and then there's national team football.
Okay.
And the two are very different. So to generate, that's the same thing which I was asking Atletico Madrid about is, hey, if you're club football, you're competing for global fans and trying to make it interesting to them. So if you're trying to reach into a global universe which considers FC or SC something else or something more meaningful, I understand why they're doing it. But if you say, hey, in order for us to be considered legitimate in soccer, because I would say when you were playing, you played to prove that soccer in the United States was legitimate. That, if I had to characterize it. Mm-hmm. Today, a part of that definition means that we play like, act like Europeans. And that's what, so Jurgen Klinsmann was actually, I thought, very clever when he's smart or insightful when he said, a country has to play soccer like its own culture. And American culture is dominant and aggressive and proactive. And I said, that's true in basketball, in baseball, and in many different things. That's why the Dream Team was so popular. But I said, you know who else was popular? The 1980 Olympic hockey team and the 1994 USA World Cup team. Why? Because Americans also identify with underdogs. And that's what soccer has an identity of underdogs in this country. And people don't want to recognize that ugly truth. And so I'll just give you an example. When people look at counterattacking football, I look at that as 1776. We didn't try to fight the British in 1776 in an army system like the British did. We counterattacked it, which I would call guerrilla warfare. Okay, until we got to a level that America was so dominant that now it's a different style. But America's nowhere close to being like that today in soccer.
How do you do it within a country that we recognize is so incredibly diverse, and with that comes this incredible diversity of thought? And therefore, if I ask you, or if I ask somebody else in the United States what they think that beautiful game is, there's so many diverse and different types of answers that we are going to get. How do we coalesce all of that into one thing? And this melting pot that we've talked a lot about for so long, how do we do it? I mean, isn't it apples and oranges when you're comparing it to other countries and cultures that are obviously have more history, but are also in many ways more homogenous in terms of the way that they think about their game. And there's not just a defined, but an accepted kind of quote unquote identity and way of playing.
This is what almost everyone told us. And you know what the data says? The absolute opposite.
Okay.
And this is what we found fascinating to us. So if you take even a country like Germany, in Germany, 7 of the starting 11 players only came from 2 academies, Bayern Munich and Schalke. Okay? And the majority of the players come from 2 states within Germany that only represent 35% of the population. So those 2 states represent the state of California in the United States. So Eastern Germany produced 1 player, Toni Kroos, who was developed by Bayern Munich. So he was found and put into their academy. So he's an exception in many ways. And only 1 player came from Berlin, Boateng. And that was it. The rest come from, they come from these areas. So this idea that America needs to find players all over the country, it actually does not happen in other places. The same thing in Brazil. Brazil is a very large country. They have many styles within Brazil. We think of Brazil with Ginga and beauty and everything else. As you guys know, Brazil won a World Cup here in a different style than what many people associate with the Brazilian style. And what we found is that even in Brazil, take São Paulo, in the north and south of São Paulo itself, there are 2 very distinct styles and identity of play.
So would we have a better chance of winning the men's World Cup if we just concentrated all our efforts on a hotbed like Southern California?
Well, I think that one of the sort of, I don't want to say it's a distraction or it's just an idea of we need to have players coming from all over the place. In the 1980 Olympic hockey team, 60% of the players came from 1 state, Minnesota. And then the majority of the others came from Massachusetts. They only 50% of the players played at the University of Minnesota. So why aren't people saying, hey, like we need more diversity in the Olympic hockey arena? Why? So this is another thing which we found about soccer. Soccer, people identify with equal opportunity, and this is underappreciated because we had the 80 Olympic hockey team, we had the 1994 men's soccer team. And then what we had was professionalization of the Olympics with the 1992 Dream Team. So America no longer has a national team that is an underdog to root for, except for men's soccer. And people think that soccer is an equal opportunity sport because most men, the average height for a man is 5 feet 9 inches tall in America. That height allows you to play professional soccer by definition. And if you take those people that are 5'9" and you ask them if you have an athletic build or you're somewhat athletic, what's your weight? Their average weight falls within what an average soccer player is. But if you take the NBA, which is an average height of 6'7", or you take the average baseball player, which is 6'1", I think, or average football player is 6'2", they're not equal opportunity sports. You have to have very physical distinctions. Even baseball, you have to have 20/15 vision. 80% of the players do. Soccer is the one sport. There's no dunk in soccer. There's no home run. There's no great physical attribute. So many people miss that identity of American soccer and soccer in America. The MLS champion is not the world champion. In our other sports, they're the world champions. Baseball, football, basketball, they're the world champions. In MLS, no one's saying the MLS champion is the world champion. So it's a different mentality. So to apply the ideas or concepts of the major sports to soccer is misunderstanding where soccer fits in the pantheon of culture in America.
Awesome. I listen. The book is What Happened to the U.S. Men's National Soccer Team? The Ugly Truth About the Beautiful Game. Again, his name is Steven Mandis, and he is the co-author of the book, along with Sarah Parsons-Wolter. It is available today, as you are listening to this, on all the different outlets out there. It's called a book, kids, okay? You read it. All right. It can have pages, or you can get the Kindle version so you can actually read it in electronic form too. But either way, check it out because it talks a lot about the things that we have for the last couple of years talked about both on and off the field and the things that we love. Steven, anything to add before we go?
We're predicting that the U.S. is going to be really competitive in 2038, after 2038. So the boys that are watching from 8 to 12 years old, the 2026 World Cup, you will see a boom come then.
Oh, all right. From your lips to the soccer god's ears out there. Thank you so much for hanging out here on the State of the Union and promoting this book, because I think it's interesting. And like I said, I think it will resonate with a lot of our viewers and our listeners out there. Thanks so much, Steven.
Thank you.
All right, Mossy, good man there, and interesting stuff that he's talking about. And for our first author on the show, I thought that this was actually perfect for the stuff that we talk about and stuff we have over the years. It was right down our alley. It's not that you or I agree with everything out there, but the way that he thinks about the game, and the way that in particular has been thinking about the U.S. and the U.S. team and the U.S. mentality and identity and all that kind of stuff that we seem to talk about each and every week. I thought it was fun. I hope people enjoyed it. We'll maybe do some more as we go forward. And evidently there's got to be more than one soccer author out there, right, Mossy, that are writing about the game?
Finally, a real soccer savant on this podcast.
All right, listen, let's get into it, because there's all sorts of other stuff that happened when it comes to the sport. As we mentioned at the top of the show, Mossy and I were knee deep in Major League Soccer. Can we start in Atlanta, Mossy? Is that okay?
Absolutely.
And the reason why is because Atlanta United, okay, not only did they win their game in the 94th minute, a walk-off winner, but more importantly, they did it in front of 40,000 people. And we worked with Maurice Adu this weekend, and he actually does the regional broadcast for Atlanta United. So he was actually in the building with 40,000 other screaming maniacs when it comes to Atlanta United. And it looked awesome. It sounded awesome. And more importantly, it felt awesome to hear the volume, obviously the payoff at the end of the game, people running around, throwing beers, taking their shirt off, screaming and yelling, doing all sorts of things. We were almost back to what we think of when we think about the game. And there's going to be other stadiums that are going to open up as we continue on. So here's to heading in the right direction. Now, from a practical perspective, Atlanta United getting a win, that's very, very important. They need that. Joseph Martinez still does not look 100%, although he started and played. But this is a good result. And as I said, for me, the big story was that it happened in front of 40,000 people. I want to go to 50, and I want to go to 60, and I want to go to 70,000 people when it comes to Atlanta. And I think people are salivating and desperate for this type of communal experience that we have missed and has been gone for over a year now. And to see it out there and to see them rewarded at the end of the game with that incredible explosion, it was wonderful. Mossy, you want to talk about that or other things that are going on around the league?
Well, that was Marcelino Moreno with that 94th.
Well, he finally did something.
Winner. Yes, he's one of those players that Atlanta needs to step up this season. The other walk-off goal, as you say, was Minnesota. Robin Lod scoring deep in stoppage time in their 1-0 win over Dallas. So they've now won 2 in a row and are heading in the right direction.
Yes, they are. And Adrian Heath is probably breathing a sigh of relief. Now, it's not unexpected in that we looked at Minnesota United, the way they finished the year, the way that they continued to kind of add and, at least on paper, look like a better team. Didn't start out like that, losing 4 in a row. Now they've won 2 in a row. And this is where these midweek games can really kind of drastically change a perception of a team and players, and in this case, a coach. Now, obviously he's not on the hot seat, having won 2 in a row this week, and but ultimately they're just living up to the expectation that we had when it comes to what the Loons, or we thought the Loons, were going to be after that. And so I think that this is, yes, it's cause for celebration, but if you are Adrian Heath, a little bit of relief, but also a recognition of you're doing what is expected of you and what we have expected from this Loons team. What else, Mossy?
Well, you brought up Atlanta and the fans and the atmosphere, so we might as well go to Cincinnati next. That was our game on Big Fox yesterday. They opened the TQL Stadium against Inter Miami, but the visitors spoiled the party. They get a dramatic 3-2 win. Gonzalo Higuain on target twice. The first assisted by his brother Federico, and then the second one was a late game winner. First off, what did you make of the whole occasion and this new stadium and what it means for Cincinnati, but then the match itself?
Okay, so obviously myself and everybody that was on set, whether it was Sarah Walsh or Marisa Dew, we were not in the building. And this is a brand new building, a brand new soccer-specific stadium. I have done these openings time and time again. They never get old. They are awesome. They are so much fun, especially with these teams and these owners now armed with a history of soccer-specific stadium architecture and building, and each one kind of wanting to impress and outdo the last one. And that's exactly what, at least from the word that we got and the pictures that we saw, has been done in Cincinnati. It is a jewel. It is the proverbial cathedral and this touchstone for not just the team and its supporters, but for the community. And there's an immense sense of pride when you see your, once again, not just your soccer team, but your city, yesterday being put on national TV, and it's an advertisement. Now, it's a beautiful box. Cincinnati has yet to find the proper equation to put something beautiful inside that box. And this is a problem. We've talked time and time again about how MLS, maybe more so than any league out there, bends over backwards to enable you to compete right off the bat. I'm not saying being elite. I'm not saying being Atlanta United or LAFC, but at the very least be a competitive team. They give you the money, the resources, the advantages, and the opportunity out there to come in and from the get-go, whether you're in your stadium or not, whether it's a soft launch or a hard launch, to be competitive. Cincinnati has been anything but. Whatever the opposite of that is, that's what Cincinnati has been. Now, as I said, at times you have a soft launch and you're looking towards the stadium. Well, now you're in your new stadium. Cincinnati, you've been around for a few years now. You know what MLS is and what it isn't. You understand, well, we think you understand what MLS is. And yet it's not for lack of trying. It's not for lack of ambition. And it's not for lack of money, because this past week, the salary numbers came out from the union. And we start to find a little bit more about how clubs and how much clubs are spending. And you're talking about these two teams, by the way, that were playing yesterday, Inter Miami at number 1, but FC Cincinnati at number 5. So they are spending money. The problem is that they're not spending money in a smart way. And so that goes to the leadership, and that goes to the individuals that are in charge of spending this money. And I in no way want to deter anybody from spending money. I love when teams are ambitious and they back it up by spending money. But you have to have people in place that have an inherent understanding of what the league is and fundamentally understand all of the challenges that are out there, and either through their experience and their history in the league or from being out there and pounding the pavement and talking to anybody and their mother that has been around and has made mistakes in the past to make sure you don't repeat those mistakes. You have to have that in place when you are out there spending that money. And too often it looks like that while that money has been spent, and a lot of money has been spent, it has not been spent in smart ways. And that is reflective on the field. Now, it was an exciting game in that there were a lot of goals, but there is also an additional pressure. I've played in an opening of stadium. My friend and colleague Marisa Dew has played in opening of stadiums. It's not just about the win. It's the win and what it means as you are, in essence, introducing yourself, or in this case, reintroducing yourself to the public, to your market, to the world, and hopefully bringing even more people in. Now, it wasn't a full stadium because of COVID. That will happen here in the next couple of weeks, and maybe that changes the atmosphere and the energy in that stadium. But Cincinnati right now is the worst team in the league, and they have been the worst team in the league now for multiple years. And it didn't look the other day that like it's going to change on the field despite this brand new, shiny, beautiful stadium that they have. And so they're going to have to get it right, because the people of Cincinnati deserve it for the support and the continued support despite having a crap team and the knowledge that they have there. There is a history when it comes to soccer. And it's a beautiful stadium. But if the stadium is your biggest star, then you got a problem. But it's still a wonderful stadium. Mossy, what'd you think of the actual game, by the way? Because at the end, Gonzalo Higuain was massive and was wonderful, as was his brother, to be fair.
The one thing I'll say about Inter Miami is I found it very interesting that Rodolfo Pizarro didn't come in until the end. It seems like Phil Neville might be moving away from him a little bit, which would be a pretty big story because that was hailed as a landmark signing for MLS to be able to attract a Mexican international at that age. But I want to talk about another player involved in this game that was hailed as a landmark signing, which is Brenner.
Where's he from, Mossy? Again, remind me and the folks out there.
He is a young Brazilian who was signed from Sao Paulo for a club record fee of $13 million. One of the
I told you they're spending money, but are they spending smart money? Or are they spending money smart? I guess it would be.
Here's the thing. His signing triggered a lot of ignorant reactions in Brazil about MLS in general. And I felt compelled to push back against that on Twitter. The problem is all the conversation about his signing was about what it could mean for MLS in the big picture and cracking the Brazilian market and creating this pipeline of young Brazilian talent to MLS. There was very little analysis about whether it actually made sense for this player to go to this team. And I know it's early, but the early returns have not been positive. I wonder if Cincinnati are now thinking that money could have been better spent at other positions. And he's probably wondering, boy, I had a nice thing going at Sao Paulo. I was attracting an interest from these bigger European clubs. And if I was going to go to MLS, maybe it should have been an LAFC or somebody like that. To go to Cincinnati was really taking a chance on something that, and I'm like I said, it's early, but so far it's.
But look, it's not as if he's a different player than he was a few months ago when he wasn't playing in Major League Soccer. And so you like to think, and this is, I guess, more of a hope, that people are able to see through and when they are assessing him, that they are assessing him within the context of where he is right now and what he can or cannot do. For example, if he had gone to, I don't know, Seattle or even LAFC, which isn't doing well, he might look very, very different, or the perception of him may be very, very different. If I was any of those teams that were interested in him right now, I would be maybe sniffing around and saying, all right, maybe his value has changed even within the last couple of months. But I recognize that he's not any better or worse of a player just because a player looks bad playing for FC Cincinnati doesn't mean that player is actually bad. It's the collective right now that it's just not the right mix of players, or the players that they have gotten in, many of them just aren't good enough. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how good you are individually. There's only so much that you can possibly do. Now, I'm not saying necessarily that is what the case is here with Brenner. I mean, the emperor may have no clothes. I don't know. It's very, very possible. But I do want to give him a little bit of grace in the fact that he's playing for not just a bad team, but a historically bad team right now.
Well, let's stay in Ohio, a team I was super high on that I can't believe what a lousy start they've gotten off to. The defending champs, Columbus, who, whatever you want to call them, they lost to New England this weekend, Toronto midweek. They are near the bottom of the Eastern Conference standings. Alexi, they have 3 goals in 5 games, and 2 of them were own goals. So the only Columbus player that's put the ball in the back of the net this season is Lucas Elrayan, a free kick against DC United. And I know there's been a lot of talk about, well, they've played 9 games in 38 days, so it's taken its toll on them. I must say, as a Brazilian, hearing that a team playing 9 games in 38 days is a crazy stretch does make me chuckle a little bit, if you know what the calendar is in Brazil right now. But nevertheless, I was super high on Columbus. I thought they had a great chance to repeat. They still might get this sorted. I mean, it's very early, but how surprised are you that the reigning champions are struggling as much as they are?
Am I surprised? No, because this is MLS, the most difficult league in the world to predict. I mean, we got what? Montreal and Colorado that are, at least for now, looking golden and looking great and looking like the surprises of the year. But of course, it's May. I got a question about my power rankings that I did over the course of our broadcasts yesterday on Fox, and I want to be very, very clear because I had Columbus at the very bottom of the power rankings. But that was actually more reflective of the week that they had, which includes the rebrand. So it's on and off the field. So I want to be very clear. My power rankings, whenever I do them, if you ever see them on television when I'm doing them, they are a subjective reflection of the week that teams have had both on and off the field. So, for example, I had Atlanta way up there. And I incorporated the fact that there were 40,000 people there and there was this wonderful moment. So it's not just about winning and losing. It's a lot of different things, in the same way as I said that I incorporated the rebrand, or, I don't know if it's not a failure, but just the bad PR type of situation when it comes to the rebrand of Columbus out there. But if you're just looking at the actual results, yeah, it's not a good week for Columbus. I still think that they are going to be okay. And I still think Caleb Porter recognizes that. I don't think it's an excuse, the number of games that they have played, but I think it's also a reflection of, this crazy league. I mean, if you're looking at the standings right now, you got, when it comes to points, you got 5 teams in the East with 8 points. You got, teams, but it's very, very close. It reflects that parity. Oh, sorry. MLS wants us to call it the competitive balance out there, but it reflects that manufactured parity because of the rules that we talk about when it comes to Major League Soccer, which also makes it very, very difficult to predict. And many people, including myself, looked at Columbus to be much better off the, right off the bat. But whether it's Columbus or whether it's someone like LAFC that are struggling here at the beginning, you need only look to someone like, I don't know, Seattle, that in the past has really struggled at the beginning of the season, only to come on great guns at the end of the season and go on to MLS Cups. So it is the proverbial marathon, not a sprint.
I want to save Seattle LAFC for last. So let's do the Galaxy next.
Okay.
Chicharito on target again, his 7th goal of the season. They beat expansion Austin 2-0. The only thing I'll say about Chicharito is he should not be taking penalties. I know it's a status thing for the star player to show that he's willing to accept that responsibility. And also, it can be a confidence boost for strikers. If they take the penalties, it's a chance to pad their stats and avoid going in droughts. But you have to make them for that to be the case. And he's clearly not good at it. And so somebody else, whether it's Vasquez when he gets back in there or Leggett, there's got to be somebody else on that team that takes penalties better than him, because
what are the numbers from Chicharito when it comes to penalties?
I read he's missed his last 4. And his career numbers are dreadful on it from the spot. So, but he did get another goal. As I said, the Galaxy win 2-0. They're flying. They're second in the West. And I'll say this, Chicharito is the story, but Greg Vanney to me is the catalyst here. He is doing just an incredible job. I know the style of play is completely different, but it almost reminds me of when Jurgen Klopp first took over Liverpool and just how he was able to lift the whole mood of that club and the whole feel around it. So hats off.
You're not giving Jovan Karowski any credit on this?
Of course. I mean, they were the busiest club in the league in the offseason, brought in a lot of new players, and guys like Bond and Williams have slotted in Villafania, all playing well. So
are they back? Because I get that question a lot. Is the LA Galaxy, in the way that we see the LA Galaxy, are they back?
Not in the sense that I think they're going to win MLS Cup this season, but I've seen enough that I definitely expect them to make the playoffs and be a factor and be a good team this season.
And look, despite his failures at making penalties, Chicharito continues to score. And I think everybody felt that there was going to come a point where he was going to go to the well and it was going to be empty. And it hasn't come. It hasn't come. He's scored in different ways. But also, I mean, even the goal that he scored this weekend, it was a classic type of Chicharito in the box, getting ahead of the back line and then slamming it home. So he's playing with an incredible joy right now. We've talked so much about the changes that he's made, both physically and mentally. It's working, whatever he is doing. And to your point, I think a lot of it is the way that Greg Vanney has, tweaked things here or there to create a situation that is conducive to a Javier Chicharito Hernandez style, because he's very different in terms of a player. He doesn't beat players necessarily one-on-one. He's not the most gifted when it comes to his touch. He's not the fastest in the world, but he scores goals and he has a nose for the goal, and he scored it in different ways. And while even last year, the amount of crosses that the Galaxy were hitting was high, a lot of them were without purpose. And so I think that there's been a real recognition of how to use Chicharito going forward, and knock on wood, he stays healthy and continues on, as opposed to LAFC, where things are not going so well for Bob Bradley and company when it comes to LAFC. So congratulations to the LA Galaxy. I'm not quite yet there to say they are back, but they are flying. Seattle is the best team in Major League Soccer right now, and it's not even a question. And LA Galaxy are certainly looking very, very good. But again, it's May.
Well, I mentioned the Galaxy are second in the West. Seattle is first. LAFC are dead last right now. So why don't we end on what was our FS1 game last night? I'll start with the positive, which is Seattle. I mentioned this word infrastructure last week, and you saw it again. I mean, they're just finding ways to win. The ultimate evidence of that was last midweek when they somehow beat San Jose with Alex Roldan finishing the game in goal. And then they go out this weekend against LAFC. We're second best for a lot of the first half, didn't play all that well, but kept it at 0-0. And then took control in the second half, getting goals from different players. Arriaga pops up with a goal, his first in his MLS career. Brad Smith, who had never scored goals before, but this season is scoring a lot of them. And here they are. You know, we hear about the LAFC injuries, but Seattle have been essentially without Nicholas Lodero this whole season. He's played like 20-something minutes, and then without Jordan Morris, and yet they haven't missed a beat, which again goes to Brian Schmetzer. And, you know, I know we talk about this a lot. I don't want to belabor this point, but the whole Jim Curtin, Gabriel Heinze, Michigas sort of shine a light again on this tension between American coaches and the quote-unquote sexy foreign coaches. And again, you see who are the ones that are leading the pack here. It's the Americans. Brian Schmetzer, they're in first place in the West. Second place, Greg Vanney. Third place is Peter Vermees. First place in the East is New England, Bruce Arena. So I'm going to cling to this, that there's something to the fact that guys that know this league are the ones that are more likely to be successful. And Brian Schmetzer doing it again.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you hit on it. It's knowing the league. Whether you're American or not is irrelevant, to be quite honest with you. But many more that are American and have kind of grown up within this league are going to have a much better understanding of what this league is. You know, Brian Schmetzer is the Rodney Dangerfield of this league outside of Seattle. Okay, and I don't think he's ever necessarily gotten or is going to get the credit that he deserves. But to your point, without Lodero, without Jordan Morris, and by the way, without Stephen Fry, who is out now for 4 to 6 weeks and has been a constant for a number of years in goal, they don't miss a beat. They whether it's the other stars stepping up like a Rui Diaz or people that we didn't necessarily see, you know, the Roldan brothers. By the way, this is a week of brothers, with the brothers Higuain for Inter Miami, both starting. And to your point, Mossy, Federico Higuain started for Inter Miami over Pizarro, the designated player. So that just shows you how much Mr. Neville believes in Federico. And so those brothers there, and then the Roldan brothers for Seattle, both of them, but in particular Christian and Alex for that matter, but Christian, who has just evolved into a great player. I never saw him becoming a great player. Serviceable, solid type of MLS player, yes, but he has become a great player. He has been able to change and occupy that position. I mean, look, he's not Lodero, but he has done some things there as he has been pushed forward that hats off to him, and ultimately to Brian Schmetzer for pushing all the right buttons. It doesn't matter when it comes to personnel, doesn't matter when it comes to formation out there. They figure it out. And they, as I said, are far and away the best team in the league. Now, to your point about American coaches, yes, you have one in Brian Schmetzer that you can point to, but you also have Bob Bradley, who is an American coaching legend that's in last place, and he certainly knows the league. I don't think that they are going to end up there, but Carlos Vela, we saw him at least get on the field, so that's a bit of positive news, but Carlos Vela has been a ghost when it comes to playing over the last year. And yes, there are reasons, and there has been injuries, and there has been situations off the field. But LAFC without Carlos Vela, they struggle because it puts players in different positions. Certainly it puts Diego Rossi in a position that I don't think he's comfortable in. And I do think that Diego Rossi's wheels are starting to spin. I didn't think that we would be seeing Diego Rossi in 2021 playing in Major League Soccer. I thought he would have been sold, thought someone would have come along, and probably he thinks the same thing. But he is a shell of his former, or he was certainly last night, a shell of his former daring and adventurous and urgent type of self that he has been, especially I like him much better when he stays out wide. He's got that wonderful first touch and that burst of speed and just beats people. But it's very hard for him to do when he's being asked to do other things now without Carlos Vela. So I still think that this team is going to be good. It just remains to be seen whether they are going to be great this year. And a lot of us, including myself, had looked at them to be great. But once again, what happens in May is one thing. And when we come up to September and October, we might be talking about these teams and these players and these coaches in a very, very different way.
No, I agree. Yeah. I mean, if they get Vela all the way back, I mean, they're so talented that you think they'll be okay, but this has been a bad start. There is just a bad vibe around that team. So Bob Bradley has to absolutely fix that.
They need someone up top too. I mean, they ultimately, and they have been searching for a number of years to have that guy up top that scores goals, takes pressure off, relieves pressure in terms of holding the ball up there. I mean, like a Zlatan-esque type of person, not necessarily that big personality, but it'll free everybody else up. And they just haven't found the right person yet up there that can do that. But I do think that they're going to be okay. What do you think, Mossy?
Yeah. I think ultimately they'll be okay. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. What else?
That is it.
That's it? All right. That's a real quick look around what's going on with Major League Soccer. But there were a lot of games, and, we didn't hit it. Alan Pulido scored twice for Kansas City. They're certainly doing well. We continue to have great games and great goals and great young players out there. It's turning into a really fun league. And my ups and downs when I come to my, what do you call it? What do we call that thing where when I do ups and downs for all the teams?
Movers and shakers.
And my rankings of teams out there. I mentioned like the Colorado Rapids surprise this year, Montreal surprise this year, and then you got your usuals was the Chicago Fire, Cincinnati. Vancouver's not doing well. The Earthquakes lost twice at home, like you mentioned, and then LAFC. Austin continues to be on the road until they open that stadium, and we've seen it time and time again over the years how teams you just got to get as many points as you possibly can, and it gets weary constantly playing on the road until you open up a new stadium. So they had a poor week, and then there's a lot of teams that are just kind of in the middle there until we start to figure out what's going on. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll take a trip around Europe because there's all sorts of stuff that's going on over there. Don't go away. All right, we're back. We're going to take a little trip around Europe here. Mossy, where should we start first?
Well, we've reached the climax of the European club season. By this time next week, the top 5 leagues will all be over. The title race that has everybody captivated is in Spain. So why don't we start there?
Okay. All right.
We are down to 2 because Barcelona.
Wait a second. You told me 3 last week, Mossy. You told me 3. What happened?
Barcelona have bowed out. I tell you, weeks ago, it looked like this was trending in their favor. They were going to win a League and Cup double this season. Ronald Koeman was going to stay. And instead, it's all unraveled. They fell to Celta Vigo 2-1 this past weekend. So they are now mathematically out.
So who are we blaming? Can we blame well, there's an American. We can blame the American, right? Serginho, this is Serginho Dest's fault because what was I reading? This is the first time that they have not been at least in the top 2 since 2007 or something like that. So that's what happens when you hire and play an American, right?
Well, I was going to save this for the end, but the coaching carousel is already percolating, and I'll mention this here. The last time they finished outside the top 2 in La Liga was the 07-08 campaign, and if you're looking for some historical parallels, they were managed by a Dutchman, Frank Rijkaard, that season. He was sacked and replaced in the summer of 2008 by a legendary former midfielder at the club by the name of Pep Guardiola, who was hired by a president named Joan Laporta.
Wow.
So they finished outside the top 2 this season when they were managed by a Dutchman, Ronald Koeman. He is presumably going to be sacked. And then Laporta, who is the president again, is reportedly looking to hire another legendary midfielder at the club, Xavi, The rumors are growing that Xavi is finally going to make this long-awaited move to the Barcelona bench. He's been coaching in Qatar the last couple of years. And so we'll have to see how that plays out. But that would be interesting.
Well, now you do it because now you can kind of only bring them back up, right? And you can be the savior, right? So it makes much more sense. But do you think that they will fire Koeman?
Yes. Okay. New president, he's going to want a fresh start. Had Koeman, like I said, won a league and cup double, then he might have been compelled to keep him, but now he has an excuse to bring in his own guy, and I think he's going to look to bring in Xavi.
All right, well, why are we talking about the third place team anyway? All right, I mean, so what's going to happen here, Mossy?
So high drama. Luis Aguilar's Atletico Madrid and Real Madrid, their city rivals, played at the same time this weekend. And with 10 minutes left in both games, Real Madrid were leading Athletic Bilbao while Atletico Madrid were losing 1-0 against Osasuna. So live standings, Real Madrid were leading La Liga. And then lo and behold, Atletico scored twice in the last 10 minutes to win. Renan Lodge equalized. And then Luis Suarez scored a late winner, a goal that I must say, I know there's still one round left. They still have work to do, but this Suarez goal this weekend had an Aguero QPR feel to it. They celebrated as if it was a title clinching goal. And incidentally, it sounds like Sergio Aguero is going to sign with Barcelona to try to fill the void that Luis Suarez left behind this past season. But so Atletico stay on top. They're 2 points ahead of Real Madrid going into the final round. So they have destiny in their hands. They're away to Ronaldo-owned Valladolid, who are battling relegation, while Real Madrid are home to Villarreal. Real Madrid should win that game because Villarreal, it sounds like, are going to play all their backups because they have their eye on that Europa League final against Manchester United. So I think Real Madrid will do their part to put the pressure on Atletico, and it'll be a matter of whether Atletico can win their game. I know Luis Aguilar was very confident last week. He's once again wearing an Atletico Madrid jersey this week. Do we want to bring him in quickly to get his thoughts on this?
Of course. Luis, up here. There he is. He's ready to go. Looking good. Haircut. So are you confident?
Yeah,
you are.
Oh, yeah. Even when they were down 2 and I saw them like put in Ache, I was like, okay, now we're gonna win, and we did.
Can you put this in context for us here? Because it's not as if it's a small team that we are talking about here, but given the dominance of Real Madrid and Barcelona, do you think that the narrative out there, you think that this is going to be framed as, yeah, but they did it at a time when Real Madrid and Barcelona were struggling, it wasn't good, it was pandemic, all that kind of stuff? Or do you think you're going to be, if you do it, do you think you're going to be be given the credit that you deserve?
I don't think we are. I think a lot of people are saying that Oblak has carried the team to the first place and that Barcelona dropped it when they sold off Suarez. But I think credit should be given. We were really, really high up and we're only still number 1 because we got that lead. We took advantage of the other teams being behind, but it's worth it.
All right. Well, we'll see. Now, Mossy, when are these games? They're not happening simultaneously, or they are?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
Which, by the way, when you get to the end of the season, they play these games simultaneously, and I saw a lot of lamenting. People like that decision day kind of feel, the same thing we have in MLS in that last weekend, and I saw some people lamenting that, man, because of TV considerations now, you never get this anymore until the very end of the season. All these games are staggered and kick off at different times. Do you like this sort of decision day kind of feel when they're all kicking off at the same time, or would you rather be able to watch more games in a given weekend?
That's an interesting question. I think that for the final day, just from a competitive standpoint, I would rather have them going on at the same time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. At the end of the season, for sure. But even along the way, would you like to see more weekends like this where games kick off all at the same time?
Oh, no.
You want to be able to watch as many.
I want to watch as many different games as possible. Although, I love the red zone-esque type of feel of games. I mean, let's be honest. It is a beautiful game. It is our game. But there's a lot of fat in a typical game that you could certainly cut out. And so that red zone type of kick around or knock around, what do they call those things? Those I find those really interesting, especially if there's interesting voices and people are really good at giving you that and preparing you and putting context into what's going on.
And I mentioned the Barcelona coaching situation, Koeman likely being out, Xavi potentially coming in. Also with Real Madrid, all signs point to Zidane leaving at the end of this season. It's not official yet, but all the Madrid papers are reporting that's going to happen. And so it seems like they are between two choices. They could go with a more tried and tested guy in ALEXI, or they could give the job to Raul, who's been doing well coaching at youth level there. And that would be going that sort of ex-player route that's very much in vogue right now. And it sounds like they are leaning towards Raul. But, this, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but it segues nicely into Italy, which is the next country I was going to talk about.
Well, I do have one thought on that, because I was reading that, Marca reported that the Real Madrid fans want Raul as their next head coach. So my question to you is, after what's happened over the last couple of weeks, do you think that the fans should have a say and there should be privy to what's going on when it comes to picking the coach, manager?
No, I do not.
Oh, but you think that they should have a say when it comes to picking the colors of their team or the way that they look, the aesthetic, but not when it comes to soccer decisions for the actual team that they are paying money to see?
I didn't say anything about the Columbus rebrand. You're projecting Twitter onto me.
All right. Well, anyway, it would be interesting, as look, we've seen times where huge stars have come in and been very, very good, and we've seen times where it hasn't worked. And whether it's a Xavi or whether it's a Raul, I think I'm here for it. I think I would like to see it.
Well, and we transitioned to Juventus, because I mentioned the coaching carousel is percolating. That's the other big club people are looking at. Pirlo is dead man walking there. And then
no, they said they're not going to fire him to the end of the year.
And then the assumption was that they were going to bring back ALEXI. Now I'm hearing Zidane, although as our good friend Steven Mandis pointed out, we were talking to him off the air about this. He said, Zidane's not going there unless they get in the Champions League for next season. Right. And so we should talk about that, because we're down to the last round of Serie A. Inter have already clinched the title. Atalanta have already clinched a Champions League berth. So now you have three teams fighting for two spots: Napoli, AC Milan, and Juventus. Napoli are third right now. They're home to Verona in the last round. I think they're definitely going to win that game. So I'm expecting them to claim one of the spots. So it really comes down to Milan and Juventus. Milan are away to Atalanta, which is a tough game. But again, Atalanta have nothing to play for. They've already clinched it. While Juventus are away to Bologna. Milan are 1 point ahead, and they have the head-to-head tiebreaker. So Juventus need to finish ahead of them on points. This would be wild if Juventus miss out on the Champions League. Obviously, it would trigger Cristiano Ronaldo leaving. I don't think a 36-year-old Cristiano Ronaldo is going to play in the Europa League next season. So, that's something to keep an eye on.
It's a disaster for either team, right? Either way, we're going to get a disaster.
Yeah, I would say more so Juventus. Milan have been out of the Champions League for several years. They obviously wanted to get back in it.
This is their project. This is the project to bring them back to prominence, right? So this would be a certain step backwards. Yeah, to your point, yes, I guess it's a bigger disaster. And I guess it bears repeating how important and fundamental playing in Champions League is when it comes to recruiting and growing. And not just the actual money, which we know is big, but when you have players and they are looking, whether old or young, to be quite honest with you, it doesn't matter. They want to play in the quote unquote best leagues out there and the best tournaments out there. And if you can't offer them Champions League, then oftentimes, all things being equal, unless you're going to pay them just ridiculous amounts of money, they, especially if they're younger, they're going to be advised, hey, you need to be in Champions League. That's where you are seen. That's where you're going to get your credibility. And that's where you're going to, if you're going to parlay it into even more money, a lot of times that's where you're going to get that resume that is going to enable you to make more money going forward.
By the way, Juventus lucky to even still be alive here. They beat Inter this past week, and they got a very dodgy late penalty for their winning goal in that game, which how everyone feels there about Juventus getting refereeing breaks. So that triggered a whole lot of, oh, here we go again. Same as always. And Milan could have sealed the deal this past week, and they drew Cagliari 0-0, which was a terrible result for them. So Juve lucky to even be alive going into this last round.
Well, look, nobody's untouchable, but ideally from an American perspective, Juventus qualifies for Champions League. I think Weston McKennie is kind of, look, nobody is for sure, but he has solidified himself as a player that's going to be part of whatever project is going forward. and then potentially being coached by Zidane, who comes in. That's a good thing, and he'll have to win over Zidane like any other player with an incoming coach. But I mean, I think Juventus has recognized that in or out of Champions League, Weston McKennie is a player that they want to continue with, and that's a credit to the work that he has done and the success that he has had.
Let's go to England next. I'm going to flip the order that Jeff Hernandez has in the rundown. Let's do FA Cup final first, because Leicester beat Chelsea 1-0. They claimed the trophy.
How big is this, Mossy? Because I see it framed out there as this incredible thing. I mean, at what point do we look at Leicester, right? And a lot of times we'll talk about them as this anomaly, right? And yet it hasn't been a yo-yo type of effect. So at what point, talk about Dangerfield of teams, at what point do we say they are a super club? They are one of the elites.
Yeah, I've said this before, but the ultimate compliment I can give Leicester to what they've become is that if somebody started following English football in, say, 2018, and you told them that Leicester won the Premier League in 2016, they would think that's way less crazy than it was at the time, because they've really solidified themselves as a top club. It doesn't feel nearly as far-fetched sitting here today that this club won a Premier League title recently than it did at the time. It was hailed as the craziest thing in sports history. So it's a credit to them. Credit to Brendan Rodgers, who's I've always liked and I think has gotten unfairly criticized at times, but very good manager. Now, great story, but we should address there was some controversial VAR stuff in this game. What
was controversial about it?
Great goal by Tielemans, but in the build-up to that, I mean, I've given up on trying to figure out the handball rule, but common sense would tell me that was a handball on Perez.
Well, there's your first mistake. There's your first mistake.
And yet former referees are all coming out and saying it was the right decision. I mean, what did you make of that? I mean,
if it had been called, nobody would have batted an eye, right? I mean, nobody would have cared because we've seen it called. Having said that, there was still a lot of work to do to ultimately get the goal. So if you're gonna stand on the handball,
I said I've given up trying to figure out the handball rule. There was one last week, early in the second half of the Santos Boca Juniors Copa Libertadores game, which if anybody has the time, go and watch it. Now, to be fair, there's no VAR in the group stage of the Libertadores, so maybe the referee just didn't see it and they would have corrected that on VAR. But the fact that one wasn't given, I almost fell off my chair. But nevertheless, that was one controversial decision. And then we had one of those millimetric offsides. We know how the English feel about those. Chilwell had a late equalizer ruled out, which again, really highlighted the difference in approach between MLS and English football, because you compare that Chilwell goal to Chicharito's goal in El Tráfico, and it just I'm sorry, both of those can't be goals. We have to sort of settle on like how we're going to approach it. Is it the lines and you can't be a little pregnant and we're going to be really, millimetric about this? Or is it more the MLS clear and obvious? Well, if it's close, let it go kind of thing. I don't know. Some would argue the answer is in the middle somewhere, but it's hard to find that middle. But it just struck me that having seen both those plays within a short period of time and how they were called was,
Yeah, there's no middle. There's no middle. I mean, if you're going to use lines, then you're going to have these things, and we're still going to be screaming and yelling. And if you don't use line, then somebody else is going to put in lines. I get it. The handball part of it. I mean, eventually we're going to come to the point, and I've advocated for this over the years, is that if it hits your hand or your arm, it's a foul. Okay. And then we try to make it as clear cut as we possibly can. And even within that, there's going to be subjective moments. But I think that's what a lot of people are. Well, I think that's where we're coming to with regards, to the lines. It's all fine and well until it's your team that gets screwed. Okay. And it's all fine and well until it actually hurts you. And you're being asked to be the bigger person, to step away and look at the bigger picture and understand that these minutia that we are dealing the minutia we're dealing with right now isn't what the spirit of the game intended or anything like. Nah, I mean, it's not going to change. It's going to continue. And even if you take away the lines, then somebody else is going to draw a line.
So Chelsea, there's been such a feel good thing the last few months since Tuchel took charge, and this could all unravel here. They're facing the specter. They lose the FA Cup final. they could potentially drop out of the top 4 and lose that Champions League final to City, in which case they would finish the season trophyless and out of the Champions League, and it would go back to being a catastrophe. And it wouldn't take that much, because the other big development in England this past weekend was Liverpool's incredible victory over West Brom, which moved them to just 1 point back of 4th place Chelsea with 2 to play. I mean, what was your reaction to seeing that? Alisson going up there and scoring a 95th minute winner.
It was a reminder or a callback to what Liverpool had been, this Camelot, this fantasy of rarefied air that has kind of been deflated and gone out over the last year. And to be fair to Klopp and to Liverpool, incredible injuries and stuff, but there was a return of that magic. And it was wonderful. And it was wonderful because it's such a unique type of thing to happen. We see goalkeepers go up all the time, and rarely do they even get their head on the ball, let alone put the ball in the back of the net. And it was wonderful for him to hear his emotion and his interview after the game. Given what he's gone through over the last year with his father and all that kind of stuff, it was a fun moment. Whether you're a Liverpool fan or not, I think it was just a fun moment to see the celebrations and how much it meant in the moment, and then to your point, how much it meant in this race that was very small margins there, to give yourself hope.
And so here's where we are. Leicester, 3rd place with 66 points, Chelsea 4th with 64, and Liverpool 5th with 63. And the goal difference between the three is all very close as well. There's 2 rounds left. They're going to play a midweek round, and then the final round will be this upcoming weekend. So this midweek round, by the time you listen to this podcast, some of what I'm about to say might be obsolete because these games will have happened. But
Mossy, before you go there, I want to ask you a question. Do you think that, because you said it would be a failure for Tuchel and for Chelsea to not qualify for Champions League? Yes. But do you think that ultimately his brief tenure would still be a failure if they don't qualify for Champions League and they lose the Champions League final, and obviously having lost the FA Cup here? Because, I mean, he's framed it kind of as this isn't even necessarily his team yet, and yet he has still done wonders.
No, absolutely. Tuchel wouldn't get tarred with this that much.
Okay.
I think they still look at his time as a success, but the overall season,
it would hamper his recruiting too, though, as we've mentioned, without there. So I get it.
But so there's 2 rounds left. And the interesting thing is Chelsea now hosts Leicester. We're taping this on a Monday. That game is on a Tuesday. So by the time you listen to this podcast, good chance that game will have already been played. And then Liverpool face Burnley on Wednesday. And then at the weekend, Chelsea are away to Villa. Leicester face Tottenham. Liverpool take on Crystal Palace. So look, on paper, the fixtures favor Liverpool. But I will say this, lost in the fact that they beat West Brom with a 95th minute Alisson winner is the fact that they needed a Alisson 95th minute winner to beat West Brom. It sort of speaks to the fact that this Liverpool team is just not dependable this season, so that they could screw up these last 2 games. But in theory, they're games they should win, which would take them to 69 points and would put a lot of pressure on Chelsea and Leicester, who have tough games left, including one against each other. So this is going to come down to the wire here, I think, and going to be very, very interesting.
I can't wait. It's exciting. It's exciting.
And then one last note in England. Although I guess there's no point even mentioning this since it happens today. But as soon as we get off the air here, the championship promotion playoffs begin, including Daryl Dike and Barnsley facing Swansea. So as soon as we're done taping, that's something you can watch, and then we can discuss.
All right. Think good thoughts. And you're listening to this after the fact here. So hopefully America has won.
And then next up, we'll go to Germany, where Bayern have already clinched the title. The big development this weekend is top 4 was settled. Dortmund and Wolfsburg will be going to the Champions League next season, along with Bayern and Leipzig. Dortmund got it thanks to a 3-1 win away to Mainz. Frankfurt really gagged this away the last few weeks, including this past weekend. They lost to Schalke, which is hard to do. And so I will say this about Dortmund, a season that at one point looked like was going to be a complete disaster. They really salvaged a pretty respectable campaign here. It looks like they're going to finish 3rd behind only Bayern and Leipzig. They won the German Cup. Last week, they thumped Leipzig in that final. Sancho and Haaland each with 2 goals there. And then they got to the quarterfinals of the Champions League and lost to Manchester City. No shame there, in a tie in which they were very competitive. So this season not looking that bad for Dortmund, and they do finish in the top 4, which has major Erling Haaland implications. And also nice to see the fact that Gio Reyna is going to be in the Champions League next season.
Yeah, and he got to raise a trophy, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mentioned Wolfsburg getting in there as well, and Leipzig. That means Tyler Adams and John Brooks in the Champions League next season as well. Lewandowski scored in Bayern's game against Freiburg, which took him to 40 goals. He equals Gerd Muller's single-season Bundesliga record achieved back in the 71-72 campaign. Just an amazing achievement.
Mossy, when Bundesliga kicks off this fall, are Robert Lewandowski and Erling Haaland still playing in the Bundesliga?
Great question. I'm going to say yes.
Both of them?
They're both still in there. Yeah. I think Haaland, the original timetable was to leave in 2022. The one thing that made him question that was the prospect of Dortmund missing out on the Champions League. Now that they're in it, I think he will want to stay another season. And yeah, I know there's even been some rumblings about Lewandowski might be open to a change, but I haven't seen any real concrete rumors on that. So until then, I'm going to assume that he'll be back at Bayern.
All right. What about France? Do we finish off in France, or what are we doing?
We will finish off in France. That is the other great title race, by the way. Lille drew this weekend. Well, PSG won, so the gap is now 1 point going into the last round. Lille still have it in their hands. They are away to Angers, it's pronounced. I know you want to say Angers, but it's Angers. While PSG are away to Brest. Also a great race for the final Champions League spot. It's only top 3 in France, and Monaco are 1 point ahead of Lyon going into the last round. So keep an eye on that as well. But so that is the situation in these top 5.
And does Ligue 1 have one more round?
Correct. Just one more round. So we'll be done next weekend.
All right. Well, look, lots to watch and lots of interesting stuff as these the musical chairs of places continues on here. So we will check that out. All right. Anything else, Mossy?
That's it.
All right, we're going to take a real quick break. When we come back, it's time for Ask Alexi. Don't go anywhere. All right, we're back, and it's time for Ask Alexi. And as we mentioned last week, we now have our own telephone number, which people can call in, and you can ask a question, or you can just leave a message with any type of comment or concern out there. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be an Ask Alexi type of situation. If you just want to tell us something, you can do that too. We will listen to them. Regardless of what you were talking about. And as we mentioned, we're going to start to add some of these audio questions when it comes to the Ask Alexi. Mossy, what are we doing this week? Because I know we do have an audio question.
Are we doing that first, or are we saving that for the end?
What do you think? Should we start it out with the audio question? I mean, this is new, so let's kind of start it out with that. How about that? Should we do? No. Let's finish it there, okay? Let's finish it. So let's do a couple questions, and then we'll go to the audio question.
All right. So first up, Cesar Perez asks, do you think the New England Revolution will rebrand itself someday?
Oh, look, rebranding has been on the lips of everyone over the last couple of weeks, and it's an evergreen type of topic, and we see it. The New England Revolution, for those that maybe don't know, one of the originals when it comes to Major League Soccer, a former team of mine, near and dear to my heart. It was where I started my career in Major League Soccer. It has a brand, an aesthetic that has not changed over the years. It's not only one of the original teams, but it is uniquely the only remaining team that has their original logo in the form of what amounts to an American flag, a waving American flag, basically with a soccer ball in it. It certainly looks dated, looks 90s. So a refreshing, and there's difference between a total rebrand and a refreshing of the brand. I think a refreshing is in order, but I think, as is the case often, it's going to coincide if and when the Crafts find a way to have a new soccer-specific stadium, which, as we talked about before, I think will be incredibly successful for not just the Revolution, but for MLS and for soccer. The closer you can get it to downtown Boston, now we all know they play out in Foxborough, the better off you're going to be. And I'm not telling them or anything anybody there anything that they don't know. So I think if there's going to be a rebrand, yes, it's going to happen with that stadium. I think, when we talked so much about the Americanness, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this at the end of the show on my one for the road. I do think that there is going to be a rebrand when it comes to the Revolution. How much of a rebrand it's going to be, I don't know. I got a feeling that it's going to be total, with a caveat, and I'll talk about that at the end of the show. So yes, I do think that they are going to rebrand. By the way, the continued saga of the Columbus Crew rebrand is, as I said, it doesn't stop, and it's a gift that keeps on giving. But there hasn't really been a turnaround or a change of course when it comes to the powers that be over there. Unlike Chicago, which kind of admitted their error and said we are going to go back to the drawing board and figure it out. So maybe they're just letting some time pass, and hopefully this, from a Columbus perspective, internally, they believe that this is going to pass and blow over, and they're going to continue on. But as I said, whether it's the New England Revolution potentially in the future or anybody else, it's rare and next to impossible to please everybody with any type of rebrand. We've talked so much about Juventus on the pod, and they had a rebrand a while ago that a lot of people looked at and said, this is very, very different than what I'm used to. And we often fear change, and we don't want change. But whether it's the New England Revolution or anybody else, yeah, I do think that there's going to be a rebrand. What else, Mossy?
You asked for this question. I'm curious to see what direction you're going to take this answer. Netflix and Chillwell wants to know thoughts on Tim Tebow back in the NFL.
So the only reason that I asked for this question is that, I want to kind of just talk a little bit about the mindset of coaches and managers, because Mossy, I'm going to need your a little bit of your help here when it comes to the Tim Tebow situation. 30-something, mid-30s, let's say, at times has had success when it comes to his professional career, a college football legend, but professional career has been stopped and started and hasn't really been a success, but an undeniable talent and athlete that's been around for a while, and a personality, if you will. We come to find out that he has been signed and called in by which team over there? Which one? It's Urban's team, right?
Correct. Jacksonville Jaguars. Our former Fox Sports colleague, Urban Meyer.
Exactly. So Urban Meyer, going to the experienced old age wisdom well, if you will. Now, the only reason why I even care about this is I'm always fascinated about how coaches and organizations put together their teams, and this imperfect science of putting together the best collection of players. And as we've said time and time again, it's not necessarily the best players, it's the best collection of players when you're putting together a team. And you got to have, the youth, but you also have to have the experience and the maturity. And so, and also there are coaches that are set in their ways, either in the prototype of the player that they want, the mentality of the player that they want, or in the specific names and the players that they want, because ultimately it comes down to trust. Who do you believe as a coach, as a manager, you're going to be able to get the best out of? And you trust that there is going to be a consistency when it comes to the players. And oftentimes it's not necessarily based in data or analytics. Oftentimes it comes down to feel. And this happens, I'm assuming in football, it happens in soccer all the time. You have, you'll have times where you're scratching your head and say, why does this coach have such an affinity for this player? All coaches have their favorites. All coaches have players that somehow either check a box or just somehow they respond to. And it could manifest in obviously the way that the player plays, or just the way that the player acts. And oftentimes it's a kind of comfort food in that you feel comfortable having this person be part of your team for the way that he or she acts or interacts with people. And because I know that there was a lot of criticism as to, why are you signing a player that's 30 something years old, mid 30s, hasn't really been, and has been out of the game now for a number of years, when you could be signing this other younger player. Coaches want consistency. Coaches want to be able to rely on you. And oftentimes players that have a longer track record are more attractive to coaches because they've seen them do it and they believe that they can do it. Doesn't always work out that way, but that's why they gravitate towards players, in this instance, like a Tim Tebow, because either off the field, the person's not a problem, not a cancer in the locker room, not going to cause you any problems. And then on the field, that person might not be what he or she was back in whatever day, but that if you can even get a portion of that out, it's going to be worth the money that you are going to pay and the criticism that you may take for not going for someone younger or someone different out there. And it happens in all sports, and it happens for all coaches out there. I'll be rooting for him, even though I don't care or know a whole lot about football. There's also, stars sell. And he is still, regardless of what you say, a star, in that I don't know a lot about football, but I know Tim Tebow. And I will be interested. I guess interested is maybe too much. I will be curious, so much so that I'm much more liable to turn on that team and watch that team. And so there's, I guess, an element of business too. And we talk so much about stars and how much they resonate and how important they are, and that Q rating and all of those different factors. So anyway, it got me thinking when you asked that simple question about Tim Tebow back in the NFL. To answer your question, let's see, Netflix and Chilwell. I think it's great. I'm here for it, and I'm excited to see how it's going to work out. And I know there's plenty of people that disagree with me. What else, Mossy? All right, we need to get to the audio one, right? Is that what we're doing now?
Correct. So I guess it's on Jeff
Hold on.
Hernandez.
I want to make sure I get the number out again. 657-549-2297. That's 657-549-2297. And you can call and you can leave a message for myself and for Mossy. Or for any of us or anybody else out there. You can either ask a question, you can leave a comment, you can leave a concern. We will sort through them and pick what we feel is the best, as we have done today. Anything you wanted to say before we play the audio?
No, let's do it.
Okay. Two things that I want to say before we play the audio. Please give us your name. We had a bunch this week where people didn't give us their name. It just makes it a little more personal, and I like it when people, you don't have to leave your full name if you don't want to. And we had a bunch of messages, which is great that people are utilizing this. I know there was a question about MLS teams, Canadian MLS teams leaving MLS and going and joining the Canadian League. I don't see that happen. I don't know why you would do that. There was another question about the U.S. and Sweden and this long history when it comes to our women's team and this group of death, our potential group of death. I do think it's a group of, well, I don't know if it's a group of death, but our old friends and foes, Sweden, which I do think cause us more problems than other teams out there. And once again, we've been picked in their group for this summer in the Olympics. So, but we are going to get to Eduardo, who left us a message on our State of the Union hotline, we'll call it, this week. And this is his question to the State of the Union.
Hello, Alexi. This is Eduardo Morales. I'm quite a fan of your podcast. I listen to it every week. Now, I got a question for you. Why do you always have to be that type of person who always starts the day with negativity and always assume that we all have, quote, something to yell about? Why do you always have to be so negative, man? Just why? Keep up the good work on your podcast, by the way. Love the show. Goodbye.
All right, Eduardo, good question. And I think you're referring to my, I guess, morning and daily tweet where I ask everybody out there what they are yelling about. We talked a little bit about a couple weeks ago about how I'm trying not to be negative. Now, you equate yelling with being negative. Now, maybe in your household, that's the case. But listen, we talk about soccer. We yell all the time about things that are incredibly positive, and we yell about things that can be happy and kind and all of those things. So just because I'm asking you what you're yelling about doesn't necessarily mean that I want you to respond with negative things or things that are irritating you. Having said that, we all know, as I said last week, that Twitter is kind of designed to be this jerk magnet. It is also designed to be this megaphone in which we give people this platform and the ability to yell things. And, there's squeaky wheels out there that yell and scream a lot. And when it comes to the show out there, the yelling and screaming of things that are negative or you're being critical of, that tends to resonate a whole lot. The reason why I ask it each and every morning is because, first off, it enables me to interact with people, and it informs me because, stuff has happened overnight that I may not be aware about. I haven't necessarily gone through the timeline, nor am I necessarily going to go through the timeline. And while I said that Twitter isn't necessarily a focus group, it does give me an opportunity to have an interaction with people as to what they are thinking about and what they think about when they think about the yelling and screaming that goes on. Oftentimes I will talk about, bring on the hypocrisy and the sanctimony and the judgment and the ridiculousness that seems to be pervasive in our world today. And I'm always interested to see what people equate that with and the different ways that people go with that. In the same way that when I ask, what are we yelling about? People go different ways. And a lot of times the responses that they get, they aren't all always negative. Oh, I'm screaming and yelling about VAR. I'm screaming and yelling about the fact that this player isn't scoring, or I'm screaming and yelling about this in politics or this in life or taxes or, the pandemic or something like that. A lot of times I'm screaming and yelling that my Atlanta United won last night. I'm screaming and yelling about the fact that I'm waking up and I went to a soccer game for the first time in over a year yesterday. I'm screaming and yelling because my kids are back in school, and it's so wonderful for them and for me, by the way, that they are back in school. So don't necessarily, Eduardo, look at it as a negative when I say yelling. Yeah, I know there's a lot of negative associated with it when I get my responses, but you feel free, my friend, to respond to me in a positive way about what you are yelling about. And don't think that I get up yelling and screaming in a negative way. I was up early this morning, running on the beach, 5 a.m., empty stomach run. My friend Jurgen Klinsmann would be so proud of me this morning, and it was glorious. And I was screaming and yelling into the wind as the waves of the Pacific crashed on the beach. And I was screaming and yelling in a fit of joy and excitement. And there was no negativity at all about it. How was that? That was pretty positive, Mossy. What do you think?
A couple of notes on this whole thing.
You have a couple of notes?
Yes. First off, if you say at the top of your voicemail, "Hey, Alexi and Mossy," you have a much better chance of getting in the show than if you just say Alexi.
Yep.
And if you're wondering, am I really that vain? The answer is yes. And I will say my favorite question this week was asked by Paul Jackson, who wanted to know what the 10 best leagues in the world are and whether MLS is in there and how MLS compares to Liga MX. Now, Paul, if you're listening, we liked your question so much. We felt like it would take so long to unpack all this that we're toying with making it a whole full-blown discussion, one of the main segments. So don't be disappointed that it didn't get in, because it was for that reason. So look for it.
It was wonderful, and it got all of our gears turning there about things to do. So I think we're going to try to work that into a specific segment. All right, Mossy, anything else from Ask Alexi? Once again, if you want to leave a message, our hotline is 657-549-2297. That's 657-549-2297. We appreciate everybody that left a message this week, and check it out, and try to be efficient. And an economy of words is greatly appreciated. And as I said before, just leave us your name, because it makes it a little bit more personal. And you're much more liable if you mention both me and Mossy and you leave your name to get on air. All right. Anything else, Mossy?
That's it.
All right, we're going to take another quick break. When I come back, I will have my one for the road. Don't go anywhere. All right, we're back, and it's the end of the show. And at the end of each and every show, I give you my one for the road. And, I really want to thank our friend who came on. Hold on a second. Let me start again. Hold on a second. Make sure you edit this. All right. 3, 2, 1. All right, we're back, and it's the end of the show. And at the end of each and every show, as you know, I give you my one for the road. And I want to just kind of continue on from where we started the show with our good friend Steven Mandis about the Americanness of soccer and how sometimes it makes us cringe and sometimes it makes us run away. And the fact that, to Steven's point, leaning into it can be a good thing and may in certain ways be the path to future success and glory and the promised land, if you will. In the last segment, I talked about, potentially the New England Revolution rebranding. I hope that as we move forward, and not just in Major League Soccer, but just in general, that teams, leagues, players, coaches, everyone, they find ways to take much more ownership and to champion the Americanness that exists in all of us, and not to be embarrassed about it and not to apologize for it. And I hope that there are brands that lean in heavily on what American soccer is. And I know it's changing and I know it's evolving, but there was a team in the NASL, a brief moment where there was Team America, and it was all American players. They were all about the American flag. And certainly as someone who lived through the summer of '94 and the stars and stripes and the denim and the way that we leaned into that Americanness, I have a connection to it. I hope in the future, as we go on, that there's more of that. It seems to be that we are trying to move away from it, either from, either some analytics or data that tells us that it's not good for business, or just a gut feeling that we have, or as I said, an embarrassment or an apology about what we are, and wanting to get away from that and wanting to be looked at as more quote unquote authentic or genuine when it comes to the things that we do on and off the soccer field in the United States, and oftentimes equating it with a much more European or international type of identity and aesthetic out there. And I get it. I understand that. But at some point, it's going to go, the pendulum is going to swing so far to the other direction that somebody's going to have an opportunity. Somebody's going to have an opportunity to, as I said, lean into the other side and be unapologetically American, and to have the red, white, and blue and the flag and the Americanness that exists in the way that we go about doing things front and center, and to plant that flag, if you will, and not apologize for it, and have it be their identity. And it's going to be glorious. Okay. And it can be done in different ways. And I know, unfortunately, in our day and age now in 2021, even our flag and the red, white, and blue, and even patriotism at times can be framed in a negative way. And it saddens me and hurts me that is the case, that, politics have found a way to make the flag, or wearing the flag, or wearing red, white, and blue, or leaning into America, as something of a negative. It shouldn't be. And for me, it isn't. And I want that to happen. And I think if going forward, there are teams that do that, I think they're going to find, we talk about the silent majority out there, but I think they're going to find that there's a lot more people that will appreciate it and love it and respect it and gravitate towards it than they realize. And because that pendulum has swung so far the other direction, there's an opportunity. And I hope somebody takes a hold of that opportunity. And I will support it wholeheartedly going forward. But we'll see. We'll see if somebody has, I guess, in a strange way, the foresight, and in a strange way, the courage to kind of do that and to say, no, I'm not going to be something that I'm not. I'm going to celebrate everything that we are, everything that we have been as a soccer playing nation, and our history that we have, and the passion that we have, and the people that we have, and the colors that we have, all that kind of stuff, because I think it can be not just good business, but a hell of a thing for soccer going forward. So I hope that happens, but we'll see. Mossy, anything before we go?
That's it.
All right. Again, thank you to Steven for coming on, and check out his latest book, because, as I said, I think it talks about a lot of the things that we talk about. If there are other folks out there that want to come on and talk about the book, and we feel that it's appropriate for our audience, we will do that. We will do that going forward. Until then, once again, use that hotline. Send us your questions in the traditional way on all the social media platforms out there. Use that hashtag AskAlexi. Continue to write and to review and to rate and to subscribe and do all the different things out there. We appreciate all of the people out there that either listen or watch and listen when it comes to the State of the Union podcast. It makes us so happy that anybody out there actually cares about the things that we say and do when it comes to this podcast. It is a labor of love, and we love doing it. We will talk to you again next week. Have a great week on and off the soccer field. And until then, and as always, size the day. You like that clip? Well, my State of the Union podcast drops every week. Subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.